For those of you in Canada, we have our meeting at Group M, our town hall. We do it at ad agencies, media conference, etc. So KJ, who is the CEO of Group M and appointed recently the president of WPP Canada, will be my guest, and we'll be having a fireside chat or ringside chat. And join us. For those of you in Canada, please come. Okay, we can move through, I think, pretty quick, buddy.
Yeah.
And then our town hall in New York, also at our member Group M, my longtime friend Janine Pogge, who is the editor-in-chief of Ad Age. She's been there quite a while, and she keeps ascending, and now she's a major player with one of the major publications in advertising. And then Doug Zarkin, who is running a big retail, sports, and media business now for marketing. And he also came out with his recent book, Moving Out of the Friend Zone for Companies and People. And then lots of networking and cocktails, as we'll do in Canada. Good. Please join us, anybody in New York or in the US. And then for on a webinar, so you can join us any place. We're going to have Elizabeth, who many of you know, who's been on the board of We Do, Women's Empowerment and Digital Out of Home, for many years. She was recently building out the Marriott Retail Media Network and running sales and operations there. And now she took on a large job running the retail media networks for IPG at Kinesso. And very exciting for her. And then, of course, Leslie Lee, who is also a major player in the industry, and she may talk a little bit about T-Mobile and Vistar tie-up. So that should be really interesting. And of course, our subject matter expert, Jen Willie, is just so amazing at empowering women throughout the world. So thank you for that. Next one, or join us, everybody in the UK or any place that you want to come fly in for. We intend to give a good seminar there. Our friend McDonald's, Kathy Connolly Livings, who's the media manager there, and I think also a friend of Mr. Nigel. And then one of our newer members, Co-op, which is soon to have probably the biggest and best retail media network throughout all of UK, as Co-op's got so many stores cooperatively tied together. And we're going to talk about retail media in store, which is our specialty. For those of you that may not be aware, retail media is about a $140 billion business, as WPP has stated, and virtually close to nil of that is in store. But in store is where in the US, 85% of purchases take place. In Canada, about 88%. In the UK, about 78% of purchases take place in physical stores. So great opportunity for all of our members. Join us. And then on the same day, I'll be chatting with our friend Matthew Dearden, and member from Alight, also about retail media, but also about our omni-channel study that we've done in Canada and the US previously, which takes a polling of all omni-channel planners, buyers, clients. You have to be a multimedia executive, and the study will show us where monies are coming from for out of home, for digital out of home, what people think about it, what we need to do better, what we need to double down on. And these are coming from the clients, largely mostly brands, that will indicate to us what great opportunities we have to move omni-channel budgets to our media. Thank you, Blake. And by the way, that'll be at Assembly at the Stagwell headquarters in London, and I think it's on Suffolk, actually right across the street, or the river from Blackfriars and Unilever. And then we have in Miami, which will be a lot of nice weather that I'm having here in rainy, freezing Toronto. We do Possible every year. And this year, my friend Jessica, who runs marketing and partnerships and branding for Shopify, will be my guest, along with Adam Powell from AdSquare. And this is a great event. Many of you have been there. It's about, I think we get 30% off for members. It's 2-3 days at the Fontainebleau in Miami. It's a whole big day. It's become called the marketing, or let's see, I think the latest is the Can of the West, or the Marketing Davos. It's got a couple of other names. So please join us there. Reach out to any of us to find your discount and join us in Miami. And then there you go. Better yet, thank you, Blake. Always on top of things. info@dpaaglobal.com to find out about any of these events. Join us, please. And I think we're winding it down. And do we give it back to Nigel? Okay, Nigel, take it away, my friend.
Great. Thank you. Let me just check that I'm sharing okay. 21. Are we seeing a nice picture slide? Yeah, awesome.
Yes, you got it.
Hi, everyone. So by way of introduction, I'm Nigel Clarkson. I'm the Global Chief Revenue Officer at TapTap Digital. And we have been asked by the DPAA, I'm a long-time supporter and member of the DPAA, and also TapTap is a member in the UK. And we're an omni-channel platform, and we wanted to talk about this long-promised a new revenue stream of digital dollars coming into out of home, and how all of us can hopefully lean into digital language, digital data in order to bring new money into out of home, but specifically focusing on location and context. Now, clearly this isn't a sales pitch, but I do have to briefly, for those of you in US and Canada who maybe haven't heard of TapTap, we are a global programmatic marketing platform, but also a DSP. And I think what's probably different is that location runs through our business. It's in our DNA. It's what powers all of our decisioning. So we take what's called an area-based approach to all of our omnichannel activation. And unlike many omnichannel companies, we are actually omnichannel. So we are plugged in and able to plan and buy advertising for customers across every single addressable media channel. But we are very much a demand side and an audience discovery based platform. So we have a saying at TapTap that everything happens somewhere. And I think in a modern world where we're leaving a footprint behind us everywhere we go, both in the real world and in the digital world, so that location data becomes addressable, and we can use that to geo-reference people and movement of people for clients. So I guess the background to this for all of us in out of home, and I know that the DPAA kind of has a mixed membership of mainly kind of ad tech vendors in out of home, ad tech vendors in omnichannel, and of course out of home media owners. And so 2024 saw a big shift in digital. 2 years before that, nearly 95% of data signals that drove either online or mobile campaigns had a cookie attached to it. And then obviously we had the news that Google was killing the cookie. And they didn't in the end, but what that has done is the last 2 years, it's made the whole industry start to focus on what the new methodologies are for targeting customers in an online world. And you kind of got two very different subsets sort of being generated. The first is sort of the ID subset. They are much more around individual one-to-one communication, not necessarily very privacy respectful. So, you know, super targeted, kind of chasing people around the internet type technology, highly technological, and it's all about scraping universal IDs and being able to monitor devices. But then you get kind of other data sets like location and context, which brings digital into kind of an old school media planning world where it's much more privacy compliant, it's much more privacy respectful, but it's still being able to help you target people in a really meaningful way. And that's been a really interesting shift. And one which, again, I'm going to bring everything around to out of home today, is hugely beneficial for us, because clearly cookies have never existed in out of home. So moving away from cookies should be beneficial for all of us. And out of home has always been contextual by location. You put ads in a gym, you put ads in a first class lounge in an airport, you put ads in a shopping mall, you're going to get a very specific audience. So leaning into those data sets of context and location is only going to benefit out of home in a kind of an omni-channel world. And just to say that although we are a omni-channel platform, we love out of home. It's been a huge growth area for our business over the course of the last 2 years. And it's certainly the fastest growing channel programmatically, not just for TapTap, but nearly every programmatic platform around the world. So location is central to everything that we do. And when typically, if you think about how a demand side platform works, so other online platforms that you may be able to mention, typically the first step is always to find the customers, to build an audience. And that's really a discovery phase of who are our customers. Once you've found those customers, typically demand side platforms will just start delivering ads to those devices. Where we differ is we put an additional layer on of location. So it's not just about understanding who our customers are, but where they are is just as important. So we lose some of those customers because they're not in areas that we feel are highest enough concentration. Where that's really interesting for out of home is that the conversation we have around who and where, we're not even talking about channels, it's channel agnostic. So this is not a out of home campaign or a mobile campaign, it's just where are my customers spending the most time? And stage 3 is what media channels do I use to execute it? So if that decision then happened to be around out of home, the great news is suddenly your planning subset becomes the same as connected television and online and mobile. So, you know, I know as an industry, we've always talked about, like, when are we going to get these digital dollars? You know, we don't want to cannibalize our own revenues in out of home. We want to go and get digital dollars. And so this, I think the way that we manage it certainly helps to bring new money into out of home. So step 1 is that audience planning section. So again, remember, this step is always media neutral. How do we define and discover our best customers using on and offline data sets? So this is not a pitch, this is just sort of giving you an example of what a typical cluster of digital, online or mobile data sets must be. And you think about the way that out of home has operated for years. There's 2 major data sets, both chronologically separate, that out of home has always used. So the bottom left-hand corner, that kind of point of interest, geographic analysis, dots on a map. You know, I want to find some pharmacies. Map appears with thousands of pharmacies across the whole of the US. You overlay that with the nearest billboard to every pharmacy, and your campaign is created. So clearly that technology is not new to out of home. We've always had it, and so that's good. Probably fast forward to about 8-9 years ago when telco data and SDK data emerged. You can see the box there called mobility. So understanding mobile device behavior and using a mobile device as a proxy for a human, you can start understanding by geofencing things like gyms and shopping malls, what devices are going into those locations, and therefore map consumer behavior based on that and put screens and billboards in the right places. So they're the sort of the 2 major data sets that almost every specific out of home DSP will use. And most media owners have probably built their own targeting technology around that. I think when you access an omni-channel DSP, you have a whole new set of behaviors and device behaviors that you can start tracking into that maybe don't exist in the existing ecosystem. So I guess the 2 main ones at the bottom are interest level data, which is contextual information. So what apps, what kind of apps or what content is people consuming? Is it news? Where are people looking at food delivery apps, for example? And maybe if we can observe that there's a cluster of people looking at food delivery apps around railway stations, so they can order their food so it's ready when they get home, we can start building some real world, interesting contextual data that's really useful for out of home. And likewise, we're able to ingest social media data. So you can start understanding what kind of brands people like, their engagement, their clicks, their likes, their shares. And that can be mapped at a geographic level. So again, you can start building out areas of higher incidence of people who talk about wine or fine dining or vegetarian food or yoga, and you can start building. So it becomes another really rich data set that out of home potentially hasn't had access to as much as some of the others. So we think that that's really interesting when you're building this sort of robust audience. And this is typical of most omni-channel DSPs when they're doing device-based behavior. There's perceived to be more rigor and more accuracy in the different levels of data and the scope of data that you can use for targeting. So that's kind of what most DSPs do in different ways. I think this is our kind of secret sauce where we differ, is that we then put all of that information through an additional lens of location. We call it geospatial analytics. But again, it's still media neutral because all we're trying to do at this point is find the audience. It doesn't matter if it's a billboard campaign, a radio campaign, or an online campaign. So we try and build what we call a kind of a 3D view of the whole country. So bringing that into the real world, you can see here a list of kind of different data sets. We've just named some of them. So you might have some purchase behavior from MasterCard. You might have some contextual triggers that tell you what kind of content is being consumed, demographic data. So all of the different data sets I'm sure we're used to in our media plans. But all of these come with a geo score of some description, whether that's they're linked into a geohash, which is the terminology we use, which is a sort of a 300 meter by 300 meter square. It might have a postcode, it might have a postal sector, a lat long coordinate, GPS, my 3 words, H4 Uber bucket, whatever they are, they've all got a geo attachment to them. So you can map them. And I think where the magic happens is these data sets are all completely disparate. They don't mean anything when they're used separately. But when you give them all a score for location, then suddenly you're comparing like for like. So you're making this data set sort of apples with apples. And what we do is we aggregate all of that data together, and effectively we build what we call an affinity area or an index or a heat map, whatever terminology you like. So what you can see in front of you is an example of Manchester. It's a big city in northern UK. They've got two terrible football teams. And let's assume that you are targeting a campaign for a new health clothing brand, and you want to target a female male audience, 18-34, interested in health and wellness. They go to the gym, they've bought things which is related to gym or sports or health or wellness, and contextually they've read or they've consumed information or apps around sport, health, and wellness. So what we're able to do is we would look at all of those different layers. They get a different score for demographics, for MasterCard. And what it would spit out is this color code, which is effectively an affinity index. So what we're doing is we're mapping the most prevalent areas that the customers that this brand is trying to target would want to tap into. So obviously the end product then would be, well, that's great. So what do I do now? Well, the dark red areas are those areas of higher concentration. That are the areas that we would say to the agency, you have to go big and out of home in these areas because there's a higher incidence of customers. Therefore, you'll get less wastage being in those areas because there's a high concentration of your exact target market. The green areas, there's fewer of your customers there as a proportion of the general population. So maybe you wouldn't do broadcast channels like radio and out of home in the green areas. So that's kind of the end product of what this does. But also, of course, there's what we now call a geotemporal element, which is the time element of the campaign, because some of those areas would be perfect for that audience at 9 in the morning, but might be terrible at 10 at night. So understanding that while an area looks good, it's not going to stay good for 24 hours a day for 2 weeks in the traditional old school way of buying and planning outdoors. So understanding when the waves of traffic are high and the areas of concentration are highest. And that's when we would recommend to agencies that they activate their out of home and their mobile. So now we've gone through the sort of the discovery phase. Whatever media channel we're talking about, we might have had a brief which is out of home only, but it would have gone through the same rigor that an outdoor and mobile campaign would have done. And step 3 is, what do we do now? What media channels are we going to execute? And this is literally a sales slide that we would use. And the reason I wanted to include it is on the left-hand side, you can see we clearly operate still in a classic sort of display mobile video kind of space. But in the middle, we talk about out of home and mobile as the same channel. And that's really, I think it's really different. Most companies talk about very separate channels. You get an outdoor brief, you get a mobile brief. And because what the analytics on the platform tells us where those customers are, we naturally feel like out of home and mobile are great bedfellows. They're perfect partner channels to use together. So most of our outdoor campaigns that we would give to a client or an agency would have mobile loaded in as a matter of course. Now, again, the whole purpose of this call is to explain why this is good for out of home and why it's good for the DPAA. Well, if you're speaking to traditional outdoor buyers, they're now able to buy mobile, which they weren't equipped or educated to do before. If you're talking to programmatic traders in an agency who've always been used to buying mobile, suddenly they can lean into the outdoor space. So we're accessing 2 different pots with the same data analytics platform. And then the really exciting area is sort of connected television and digital audio, because those channels now are addressable. So we can start thinking about them as location channels and start understanding the relationship between out of home and connected television and audio. So again, as I said, this isn't a pitch because this is how every out-of-home DSP operates. So typically you find the areas of richer concentration of your customers. You'd layer on the sites on top of that and you'd buy that. I think where we may be a little bit different is you can use this planning for static out-of-home as well. To us, it's just a dot on the map. Whether it's digital, we can execute programmatically, or static, we can pass that file on to the people to sort of buy in their usual way. But out-of-home, interestingly, if you're talking to a client and an agency that really leans into the location space, out of home is obviously the easiest channel to buy as a location, because 90% of inventory in out of home is either stuck to a wall or nailed into the floor. So it doesn't move and it is by nature fixed. So actually the easy bit is that because that media doesn't move, understanding audience patterns past it means that's where you do most of your best audience planning. The exciting thing, and hopefully kind of a slightly new message, is that both buyers and sellers are using this technology now to use mobile and out of home together to extend and amplify each other. So out of home has that incredible top of funnel awareness. It's big, it's public, it's unskippable, it's unmissable. And mobile has that sort of granularity and that measurable quality that digital has. And You know, we are talking to buyers, as I said, in like classic out-of-home buyers who are now starting to buy mobile, which they've never done before. Programmatic traders are starting to buy outdoor, which they haven't done. And even sellers on the digital out-of-home side are starting to sell integrated campaigns like $100,000 of out of home with $10,000 of mobile impressions served on top through a third-party mobile vendor like TapTap. So I think that's really interesting. We should all be talking this language around fully integrated platforms. We're very guilty in out of home maybe of talking almost entirely about out of home and not about those other channels and how they operate together. And as I said, an amazing opportunity. We're starting to have conversation, interestingly, more out of the US than anywhere else, but because I think CTV is super developed there and it's hyper local, so they already understand how this works. But you know, connected television and audio can now be bought in an addressable fashion, which means you don't have to buy huge $1 million campaigns with huge footprints geographically. Actually, you can start doing IP address targeting, which means you can do geo-targeting, which means a hyper-targeted outdoor and connected television campaign can now go together. And particularly with digital imaging, you know, being available in and out of home now, really, really exciting. It's very early days for sure. But understanding hypermobile delivery through location as a singular lens for planning audience, I think is going to be a really, really core sort of proposition for the industry for the next couple of years. And the kind of conversations we're having with agencies around this technology, which hopefully is of interest to you guys, is certainly drive to store is huge. I know that we, DPAA, have spoken to Tesco in the past, and their kind of head of data at Tesco Media talks about sofa to store and how understanding that customer journey from the living room to the shop door is really important. Understanding how you interact with a customer at that last mile is really important. And again, it's one of the huge strengths of out of home and mobile together, that sequential channel to reinforce brand messaging and maybe a pricing or promotion before somebody gets to the shop door. So that understanding customer journeys for a location is important. Awareness is still super important, right? Mobile is the sharp end of the performance metrics. It doesn't always get big brand campaigns. Out of home is amazing at brand awareness and top of funnel. We don't want to lose that because it's the strength of the channel, but we also want to help out of home come further down the channel so it becomes seen as an awareness and a performance channel. And we talked briefly around sort of contextual and social. Clients want to use data from other sources like social media or like context and understand how they can plan out of home around that, because millions of dollars is clearly going into contextual advertising and social. So understanding how we all understand our place in that area is really important for out of home. And then lastly, measurement and results is never the sexiest subject, but it's clearly at the top of importance for clients, right? And out of home has traditionally struggled with econometric modeling, has not been designed to understand how out of home works. Mixed modeling, media modeling sometimes works well for out of home, but actually we've now got through digital and location much better access to different types of measurement. So, you know, obviously we've always had awareness and consideration. That's fine and that's great because we still want to do the big announcement bit. That's what outdoor does well. But the two really interesting areas here are sort of measuring footfall data, so understanding the effect of an out-of-home campaign to driving traffic to a QSR, to a mall, to a car dealership. Using SDK data is really important. And again, I know a lot of people in the space already using that. Where we're really excited is because we are monitoring the success of digital and mobile campaigns and video campaigns for click-through rates, for performance rates, for click-to-views, for app downloads, being able to model and use and measure those online metrics for out of home, I think is a game changer, because I'm sure all of you on this call have had the challenge of going in to see a digital agency and they just look a bit disappointed that they can't measure click-throughs or downloads from a billboard ad. But actually you can start measuring those when you do outdoor and mobile together. So I think some really interesting benefits to the wider channel there for all of us. I haven't got time to do loads of case studies because each one probably takes 5 minutes, but just to cover one quick one. This is TIA, was one of those public electric scooters, which are both useful and a slight nuisance, but that's a different subject. And their brief was to drive awareness. So we want everyone to see it, but it also has to drive performance. And so we basically were used to build a big out-of-home campaign targeting those relevant audience areas, but also to layer on mobile retargeting to geofence those out-of-home sites. So it's pretty simple, out-of-home and mobile together, and understanding what that retargeting story looked like. The end product ultimately was a brilliant campaign for that brand, using integrated mobile and out of home in the towns that we tested versus the towns that didn't have integrated channels, drove a 50% higher mobile click-through rate. So it's great that out of home was measuring digital metrics, and their monthly downloads increased by 300% in areas that had both of those channels at the same time. So I guess we all think inherently it makes sense, but having case studies like this to prove that those campaigns have worked is really useful. So yeah, look, I think that was what we wanted to talk to you about today. I think the power of location, not just as a proximity tool, which is like, I want to stick some ads outside of McDonald's. We've been doing that for 10, 20 years. That's not new. But understanding that location and context can unify all of those different data channels and really position out of home in a conversation with planners and clients, that if your data set and your audience analysis is in the same place, then executing out of home and CTV and mobile and display and video at the same time becomes much easier. And we're certainly having great success with that. I'm sure other partners are as well. Always happy to connect if anyone wants more information. I've tried to keep it unsalesy, but hopefully, I hope, the one thing we've always talked about is we want to lean into the digital space. We want to take money off digital channels. We don't want to reposition money that we've always taken in out of home to just be bought by a different product. So that's really our vision of everything that we've done over the course of the last 5 years. And yeah, as we said, everything happens somewhere, and being able to measure that somewhere is very, very important.
Sweet.
Over to you, Blake.
Nice. Thank you so much. That's a great presentation. And I think that you are right. We all are doing this on our own a little bit, but we could definitely go deeper into contextual relevance and just measurement in general. I wanted to open up to anyone who is on the call. If anyone has questions, just unmute yourself. I'm sure Nigel has heard it all, so I'm opening it up to whoever. And also,
I have a question. Sorry,
yeah,
Blake.
Neil.
Sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
hey, Neil.
Neil.
Hey guys, how are you? Thank you, Nigel. That was really good and really interesting. So I'm at Outfront.
I know.
Billboards and transit inventory. Question for you about the planning tool, and showing the areas, kind of I guess the little 300 by 300 meter squares that over-index for a particular audience or not. Is there any thought to the idea of like audience origination in your planning tool, meaning like the audience that shows up here in high density starts off over here, and they're driving by billboards every day on their way into the city center where they spend the rest of their day.
Yeah, so that's that classic sort of measurement of the customer journey, the start point, the midpoint, and the end point. So I think that's where the SDK element comes into its own, because I think the interesting thing about our DMP is that a lot of the data is kind of fixed offline data. So census data, for example, where it's updated every sort of 3-4 years. Mastercard data is at a postcode level, so it's not actually real-time device to device analysis. What we're doing is we're showing that what our input would be that route, here's the areas along that route where the areas are at their highest concentration. If you wanted to just understand, right, I want to know what customers have started here, as in your New York Central, and what customers have ended up here, you can do that, but you just pick out specifically the SDK data, because that's the monitoring of devices. The other bits are, some of them aren't even device or cookie based. They might be government, they might be voting habits. All of those different bits go into building a kind of the multi-layered data set. But yeah, the SDK data would definitely be able to pull those journeys apart.
All right, thank you.
I think where it would be useful would be to build up the different segmentations of your stations. So we all know, and again, I'll use my UK experience, but going into Oxford Circus stations around the corner between sort of 7 and 8 in the morning, that's everyone's wearing a suit and they're all going to really super smart jobs from sort of 8:30 to 9:30. It's those media types in jeans and trainers, and then during the day it's kind of shoppers, it's students, it's tourists. It's early commuters going home from 4 to 5:30. It's late commuters, and it's people getting drunk and eating in London. So that one singular station actually probably has 9, 10 different demographics, and I know you and I have been around for years, but in the old world, we would have picked it because it delivered most of those things, and you'd put an ad up for two weeks. But we know now with digital signage that you can actually segment those offerings, and maybe instead of your budget going to 50 billboards, your budget could go to 200 billboards, but only at the right times that they're relevant. And I guess that's the promise of programmatic and geotemporal data.
Great. Anybody else?
Easy. Blake, you told me I might get grilled. This is too easy.
Well, I was gonna say, if you would like to, Nigel, if you want to put your email address or a catch-all email address in the chat, in case anybody else doesn't want to ask a question out loud, they could reach out to you afterward.
I can grill you more if you want, Nigel.
I have a question as well. Yeah.
Come on.
Let's let Brian go first, and then.
Thanks,
Hey, Brian.
Thanks, Neil. Hi, Nigel. I'm Brian. I work at the People Platform, which is a Stagwell company. On the measurement side of things, are you including video measurement as well?
In terms of what, as in click-through rates, click-to-view?
Not in click. If you're doing in the out-of-home sense, if you're serving video ads, do you have measurement for the video ads for people, the amount of people seeing those ads?
As in like the GeoPath metrics.
Different. The People Platform does video measurement.
Yeah.
Video ad measurement, digital video ad measurement, and out-of-home situations. So that included video measurement as well.
Right. So is that more of an engagement play? A video ad drives more engagement than a static ad, and
I think of it as, because this was a Nielsen solution, like ratings for ads out of home.
Right. I don't think so. Okay. Do you know a platform?
Let's talk. We could help with that on that side of things.
Neil, you're back.
So this is another hot button issue for me. When you guys are looking at the audiences that are moving in front of screens, are you looking at the screen level itself, or are you just kind of like, here are all the screens that are within this polygon or hexagon, or I'm sorry, I can't remember, geohash, whatever you guys use.
Yeah.
That are available, and these are the ones you should run on because this is where your audience is. And I bring that up because basically what I want to know is, and again, admittedly a little self-serving and selfish, but does a roadside billboard get the same credit, or does it get more credit than a screen that's on top of like an ATM in an independent convenience store?
Yeah. So that's, I'll answer this not as TapTap, but as everyone that is an out-of-home DSP. That data is owned by the GeoPath and Routes, right? Because that's the impression data, and I guess it's probably more often reflected in the price. I do find it astounding all over the world, the differences in pricing and out of home that you don't get with video. So I could buy a billboard campaign in the UK, and the prices would vary by 70% for the same size screen. And given that it's a cost per thousand, that feels a bit crazy. So no, we and other DSPs wouldn't differentiate. That data would sit via the SSP partners and the publishers that's pulled directly out of Root or yeah, I think it raises a whole separate conversation around measurement and engagement and the effect of size and positioning. But yeah, hopefully we're reliant on the industry standards for audience measurement and signage. Is that, you said it was a loaded question, but is that from the point of view that, like, is there a belief that certain things should punch better than they do?
Yeah, I guess it's more a question of attribution after the fact. You know, if every screen, you know, gets a 300-meter geofence around it,
Yeah.
right? Like it's overweighing small screens that might be indoors versus like a billboard or
Right,
you
okay. Oh,
know,
I think that's a different. So if I'm understanding
yeah.
that, so the geohash, the square, right, the polygon, as you said, the purpose of that is to be able to do macro measurement, because any more micro level, the computer power required to would be crazy. So in the UK,
And probably the privacy issues too, right?
yeah, exactly. In the UK, there's 200,000 geohashes, right? And we're tiny. Like God knows, US is like 50 times bigger, so I can't even do that math. But you know, like, so you got a billion geohashes to measure, and each one of those geohashes have got access to 20 different data sets at the same time. It's just it'll get crazy. So the purpose is that at a macro level, you say these are the areas of higher concentration of your audience, but we are still able to drill down specifically to like GPS level. It's just that for the analysis sort of side of it, we keep it really high. And the usual filtering that takes place, what we wouldn't do is it doesn't just, I think what you're trying to get at, our DSP would not behave that every screen is the same. You still have that usual filtering to say, I want billboards and roadside bus shelters, or, you know, you want super premium Times Square and Cromwell Road and Piccadilly Circus. You're still able to funnel. So it'd be very unusual that someone would just bang every site available in a geohash and buy 20 of them, regardless of what size or shape it is. Because, you know, that creative restrictions and everything else would generally model that back to a sort of typically a billboard or a roadside portrait screen.
Okay, thank you.
Have we lost Barry? He's always got a question.
Hey, Nigel. This is Stephen with Captivate.
Hey, Stephen.
Thanks so much for the presentation. It was great. I had a question, I guess maybe it is actually a bit specific about TapTap, which is, so you've done all this planning, you've done all this analysis, this hyper-targeting, location, et cetera. You've got your dynamic feedback coming in. I guess maybe it's a two-part question. I'm curious, your currency for out-of-home, I assume, is MAIDs that you're then feeding back in to ultimately adjust the campaign on the fly. And are you getting that, capturing it through your own third-party partner? So you're essentially bringing that data in, or are you relying on the SSPs to have that connection, ultimately capture that information and send it to you?
Yeah, it's not always MAIDs analysis, actually, because a lot of this, as I said, a lot of this isn't even device-based behavior. You know, census data, for example, is home address, right? A lot of data we would onboard from a retailer around their home customer address. So it would be a home address and postcode. So it's not necessarily MAID collection. It's not necessarily real time. One of the challenges I think that the out-of-home industry has around, particularly around the retargeting area, is you would deliver a campaign and out-of-home, say 1 million impressions, and then you would pitch the mobile devices back for retargeting, and sometimes you might only have like 2,000 mobile devices to pass back, because there, you know, you have to be right outside the screen at the exact time the ad is playing in an environment or an app where there's location enabled, sharing of data enabled, and measure it directly to the play logs. Our approach is actually slightly different, that if your planned out of home is in a fixed area and your mobile runs at the same time, there is a higher likelihood of that to work, because it's a real challenge for any other partner to scale real, you know, like real exposed audiences to then retarget. And again, I don't know if your experience has been the same, but when you run an outdoor campaign, you don't get many device IDs back. So actually, we are much more around just advertising those channels at the same time in the same places. We have done quite a lot of work, actually, fun enough, in elevators and offices around, you know, big corporate businesses trying to understand using mobile data to build and execute the outdoor campaign. So it's like I don't know, made up, let's say Deloitte has a huge office building in Canary Wharf in London. You can do a geofence around mobile device IDs, see what train and tube stations most of those devices go to, and then you can do an above the line campaign for outdoor. So we do some modeling where we use the mobile device behavior to plan the outdoor, but it's not always in real time, because I don't think it needs to be, and it doesn't scale.
Yeah, that's great. Makes a lot of sense. I think you're right. as you look at a lot of these attribution research studies, certainly around brand lift and all that, you find that they require very high minimums in impression count just to get to enough scale from devices to make it statistically relevant. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that you've, in essence, through your platform, been able to, in essence, combine the two of them to be able to create that scale without needing to have it fully reliant on the digital signage to do all the lifting.
Yeah, because that geohash behavior tells us we're not guaranteeing it's going to go to an 18 to 24-year-old interested in health and fitness. We're saying that if you advertise in that area, it is more than likely that those people are going to be the kind of people that you hit. So you've got less wastage. So that's hence the privacy. You're either privacy respectful and privacy compliant, in which case you're less targeted, or you're creepy and you chase people around the internet. And as I saw at a conference recently, somebody in an agency said, I've never been asked on a brief to be creepy to chase people around the internet. So that's our approach.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephen. Are we good? Any more?
See, let me check the chat. Oh, Paul had some technical issues with his sound. So he was wondering, how does the platform play with programmatic?
I mean, it is a programmatic platform, so nicely, I would hope. Yeah, we are a DSP. We're plugged into 130 SSPs globally. Our background was actually we were a mobile ad network, so we're plugged into all of the digital and mobile exchanges that you would expect, and plugged into most of the major global out-of-home SSPs.
Nice, sweet. Let's see, anyone else? If not,
I have a quick question. This is Tracy Maynard. I'm with Audience Media. I am new to this, not new to out of home, because I come from traditional out of home. And the company I've been working for now, Audience Media, we specialize in niche place-based media, digital and static out of home, and mixed-use developments. Here's my question. As it relates to the currency that you referenced, quantitatively, right now, is the standard Geopath, or are there others aside of Geopath that you consider quantified currency for out of home in the way that you look at it?
Yeah, good question. I think ultimately this is pushed by clients and agencies. And I don't think in the major markets like the US, Canada with Comb and Root, we're not being asked to go and find aggressive alternatives, because actually they're in pretty good shape. I've also worked in traditional outdoor previously in the past, and around the world, there's much bigger challenges in markets like India, which is this huge audience, but they have no recognized audience measurement system. So they're looking at mobile tickers. Often the media owners are providing their own homework, which is slightly risky. So we're not being asked to provide any of the data. I know there's many alternatives. There's businesses that do eye tracking study, particularly place-based, inside out of home. So things like shopping malls does face tracking, it does Wi-Fi hoovering, it does footfall, it does, so there's lots of different ways. We're just not asked to do it. And I think for us, if there's an industry standard that buyers and sellers are happy with, it's not our job to break it. If somebody was desperate for us to onboard a different methodology, I'm sure we'd look at it. But is that question again? Does that come from a point where
yes,
you have a different tracking system that you feel does a different job or a better job for your place-based inventory?
No, we are right now currently audited by Geopath, but we are looking to see what else is out there from an accepted and countrywide standard that would be utilized.
Right. Yeah, as I say, I know there's several individual players that do other bits, but I feel like certainly the maturity of Geopath, Comb, and Root, it's hard to come off those, because it's just the entire industry standard is set by them. But I can understand for some players it can be difficult, and it would make sense to go down a different route if you wanted to sell directly, for example.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nigel, Stephen again. I got one more question if nobody else has one. I was curious to talk a little bit about CTV and IAB CTV out of home delineation. Looking at how you kind of bucket the sales approach, right? Display, mobile, digital, out of home, mobile extension, CTV, and audio.
Yeah.
Is your organization grouping that because you're finding that it's really grouped more just because they support each other from like a like basis as an extension, or are you actually finding that CTV budgets and audio budgets are starting to blend and mobile and digital out of home budgets are starting to blend? So it's kind of that, where are you seeing it, right? Because at least in North America, I think there's this idea that maybe there's the dream that, CTV out of home could be the bridge for CTV to spend on digital signage, but you've kind of got it bucketed a bit differently.
It was the latter one that you talked about, which is basically that we're seeing increasingly that agencies are set up with AV teams and out of home teams seem to be leaning into mobile a bit easier. I think that, CTV is a whole subject in its own right, clearly, but you've got the kind of broadcaster content. They're desperately trying to protect that and roll in their linear TV deals. CTV is really interesting, but ultimately it's still open exchange, long tail, this stuff, or you have to go direct to a Netflix or a Disney through certain providers. But from what I understand, most publishers, wherever they are, they're not passing much information into the SSP. So all of that rich data around what programming, is it news, is it sport, is it light entertainment, it's not being passed. You're kind of just buying blindly devices. And so, having an understanding around audience data, for example, even at a basic geo level, and then delivering to IP addresses, we feel is really exciting. But yeah, the outdoor, the tele and audio bit is just because certainly in most agencies we speak to, the AV teams are now joint. So it just makes sense to be able to speak to the same buyers. Because as you know, trying to speak to anyone in an agency outside of the outdoor team about outdoor can get some very blank faces sometimes. So yeah, you just got to, I guess it's the classic fish where the fish are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Anybody else? Nope. All right. I think this is a good spot to end it. Nigel, if you have any contact information you're willing to give the group, more than happy to let you put it in the chat. But otherwise, I'm sure you can find Nigel or anyone else on the call on LinkedIn.